Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Bob Mackin, an investigative award-winning reporter and publisher of TheBreaker.News. Welcome back to the show, Bob.
Thank you.
The BC government has declared a state of emergency about the forest fire situation. Are they doing everything they can to fight those fires and using all available resources?
Well, that's a big question. We don't exactly have a very transparent government that has told us everything about the fleet that it has, about the planes that it has at its beck and call, what kind of equipment they have, equipment that may be provincially owned, equipment that's owned and provided by contractors, and whether they're actually using the law in the best way possible. Because the law basically says that the government can go and second property and material to help in the fight against the forest fires. It has the ability to set prices, for instance. Is the government, when this happens, when it does declare a state of emergency under the Emergency Program Act, is it actually going to the letter of the law, and is it naming a price for fuel? Is it naming a price for those contracts for helicopters and other fixed-wing aircraft? And is it going after the right aircraft? Of course, there's still the debate over the Martin Mars is still alive, and well, we haven't got a good enough response from government saying exactly why it's not necessarily in its fleet. You'd think that government would want to throw everything it can at forest fires as quickly as possible, as much as possible, to deal with the problem. But that might be another story, another day for more FOI requests that we'll probably have to wait until the winter to get, even though the government does have on the books in the Freedom of Information Law, Section 25. It's called Public Interest Paramount. It's a public interest override that says anything else in the Act that says you can't get documents, well, if you play the Section 25 card, the government is supposed to unleash the files when it is something of nature of public health or safety or the environment, or for any other reason with public interest.
Well, also
it's rarely used by government because government would rather function with less sunlight.
Well, I'm wondering too about those giant Russian-made logging helicopters. Are they being used to fight these fires?
That's a good question. They don't give us a full list of all the equipment that they're using. I think that's an unfortunate thing for government to not tell us how they're throwing all the resources into the forest fire battle. This is not national security or military. This is not an invasion of BC. There's no one out there. The only battle that they're facing is against the fire itself. And so why not tell us exactly how they're fighting the fires, who's fighting the fires, how much they're spending, and if there's a more efficient way of doing this.
Well, the BC Liberals have been strangely silent about this because their file on fighting fires wasn't all that good.
Well, of course, the BC Liberals only pop their head up and criticize the NDP when it's something that serves the BC Liberals. This is not uncommon for a party that falls out of power and has little credibility because it's spent so much time in government and doesn't remember what it's like to be in opposition, fighting for the people. An opposition party like this, similar to the way the NDP was when they were decimated in 2001, they got a bad record, bad reputation of what they did while in office, and it's going to take them a long time to swallow their pride and remember that their responsibility is to the people first, not the party and its donors. So, the BC Liberals and so many files in opposition just have no credibility. And, the Greens are in a unique position being the junior partner of the NDP, helping the NDP stay in power because of their alliance, their pact. Every once in a while the Greens do say something interesting that might be critical of the NDP, but, doesn't go the full 9 yards. So it really is a unique time in British Columbia when it's, all sorts of issues across the spectrum. It's up to the public, and especially it's up to the media, to be asking the questions and shining the light on the government and criticizing the government when it needs to be criticized.
Are the Greens in favor of letting forest fires just burn themselves out?
As far as I know, they aren't. And of course, there is that theory within government that sometimes you let some forest fires burn themselves out, which is rather perverse. But there are those who have a firefighting down to a science, and sometimes they say, well, let's do a proactive burn. There's proactive burns to get rid of certain amounts of what would be kindling. These proactive burns, preventive burns that do happen at other times of the year. The government does issue news releases about that if you take away fuel, then the fire won't be visited upon an area. That's up to the minds of far greater experts on that than me. But this is something that report that the government did earlier this year that George Abbott co-wrote, I don't think is nearly enough. I think they might even need to have a minister of forest fires, a dedicated agency, dedicated ministry to pull all the resources of government together, because government does have a lot of resources spread across several ministries. Maybe it's time to pull them all together into one ministry, maybe the Ministry of Disaster. We do have an emergency program, Emergency Management BC. It gets bounced back and forth different ministries, and of course the Finance Ministry has a big role to play in this. The Environment Ministry, Ministry of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources, Agriculture. Maybe it's time to have a cross-ministry office or a dedicated agency that is either a crown corporation, full crown corporation, or full ministry that is all about disasters. Maybe that's the way to go in the future, so that they could have a department, an agency, a crown corporation, ministry, whatever you have, that would be top-level billing, that its job would be to prevent and mitigate and clean up from disasters. A Ministry of Disasters. Let's get that happening.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test numerous targets located by recent groundwork is planned for early 2018. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink's CYDVF, and on Frankfurt's C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, 8 people vying for the position of mayor in Vancouver in the upcoming civic elections. Who are the people and who stands out so far?
Well, it's a long list. I don't know if I got it all memorized, but Shauna Sylvester was first to throw her hat in the ring really earlier this year as an independent. Someone with long and close ties to Vision Vancouver and very close to Gregor Robertson, so that is a bit of a taint for her. Kennedy Stewart, the NDP MP from Burnaby South, he threw his hat in the ring and has resigned his spot as Member of Parliament. He has the backing of the Vancouver District Labour Council. He's got the backing of Big Labour, which is something that didn't happen for Vision Vancouver. It decided after a lot of humming and hawing to run Ian Campbell as its candidate. He is a hereditary chief with the Squamish Nation. He lives in North Vancouver. Now, this is Vision Vancouver, the same party that in the 2014 election bought attack ads against Kirk LaPointe and the NPA, because Kirk LaPointe did the terrible thing of living at the University of British Columbia. He didn't even live in Vancouver, he lived in the University of British Columbia, and that was such a big issue that unfortunately actually did get some votes for Vision Vancouver for Gregor Robertson in 2014, even though there's history that does say, for instance, Mayor Fred Hume, way back when, he used to be heavily involved in Westminster politics. He had a house in West Vancouver, which is actually now owned and occupied by Jimmy Pattison. We had a mayor of Vancouver at a time back in the 50s, Fred Hume, who commuted from over on the other side of the water from West Vancouver. And from all accounts, that was a well-run government under Mayor Fred Hume. So why was it such a problem to have Kirk LaPointe in 2014 become the mayor as someone living at UBC who actually did promise to move into Vancouver if he had won the mayoralty? Here we are in 2018 in Vision Vancouver, which campaigned in 2014 against its opponent who lived at UBC, was promising to move to Vancouver if he'd won. Now running a candidate from North Vancouver who hasn't promised to move to Vancouver if he wins. He is someone that has been on the board of a development company that involves 3 First Nations who are partners with the Aquilinis. He's a real estate deal maker. At a time when a lot of people in the public, because of the housing crisis, don't have warm and fuzzy feelings about real estate agents, to say the least. So you have that. Ken Sim is running for the NPA. He was nominated back in June after a bit of an acrimonious race because Hector Bremner, the rookie councillor, the former aide to BC Liberal Deputy Premier Rich Coleman, he wanted to get the NPA nomination, but the NPA board at the time rejected it because he decided when he was elected last year to stay working as a vice president full-time of a company called the Pace Group, where he is a vice president. It's a company that handles public relations campaigns. It's a company that's involved in lobbying governments. So there's already a complaint or two about conflict of interest against Hector Bremner that City Hall is dealing with based on its code of conduct. But Hector Bremner is running with his new party, the Yes Vancouver Party, which stole the name from a charity that is called Yes Vancouver, which is involved in helping women get on their feet and into the business world. Then you've got David Chen from Pro Vancouver, and another new party, kind of a middle-of-the-road party with some pragmatic ideas. It wants to get a handle on corruption, stop the corruption that's happening at City Hall, and deal with the rubber stamping that has happened during the Vision Vancouver years, rubber stamping of development permits and rezoning permits. There's a lot of problems here in Vancouver with the supply of housing, and housing supply has been deemed to be for the rich only. Pro Vancouver really wants to get a handle on that. Then you've got a new entrant, Fred Harding, former West Vancouver Police senior officer who was the face and voice of the West Vancouver Police for so long as its communications person. He has an interesting wife, Chinese singer named Zhang Mi, who's also a model. And that has gotten him a lot of attention from local Chinese media. I interviewed Fred Harding for my edition of the podcast published last weekend. You can find it on the Breaker.News, Breaker.News podcast. Now, he is someone who is going to bring to the debate law and order because of his past as a police officer. And the fact that whoever wins the mayoralty this fall in the October 20th civic election will automatically become the chair of the police board and will have a great deal of influence over the direction of the Vancouver Police. We saw in recent years, of course, Mayor Gregor Robertson has not been a very strong leader when it comes to law and order, and we saw what happened, for instance, in the mushrooming of marijuana retail stores, that the Vancouver Police decided to take a step backwards and not close those stores unless they found ones that were involved in other activities, maybe connected to organized crime, but that didn't happen very often. The police really turned a blind eye to these marijuana retail stores that were technically, and still are technically until October when the federal law changes, technically they're against the criminal code. And City of Vancouver, Mayor Gregor Robertson, aka Police Chair Gregor Robertson, didn't make that a priority. So we've got all these stores. We'll see what happens with other priorities. Whoever becomes the mayor on October 20th, what kind of priorities they set when it comes to policing the city.
Well, for all those marijuana shops, they do have to pay massive business licenses to the city. They're perhaps cash cows.
Well, it depends what massive means, because they also are supposedly under pressure of massive fines if they continue to operate without the business license from City Hall. And City Hall has not been very successful in collecting those fines. And the ones that pay the massive business license fees can probably make that back in pretty short order. Again, this is an industry that was allowed to come out of nowhere, essentially. And they probably have some overhead here, staff costs here, and we don't know if they're paying all their taxes. Some of these shops have been fly-by-night. Others have been a little bit more stable. And some are spending money to advertise. But again, they're offering a product which, just like liquor, is widely demanded by people, and people will sometimes pay a premium for it. And the other problem with the whole industry is we don't know the quality control or the sourcing of what they have. The federal government does, for those who need it from a medical standpoint and get a medical license from the federal government to obtain marijuana for medical purposes. They do have their own accredited and regulated farms, but what's sold in these shops around Vancouver, the quality control is not there, and the sourcing is in question.
We'll have more with Bob Mackin right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Bob Mackin. Bob, 4 members of the BC Lottery Corporation went on a junket to Macau while the organization apparently was under investigation for money laundering. What's the story behind that?
Well, this is interesting. I wrote a previous story about the three amigos, CEO Jim Lightbody, Robert Croker, the security director, and Brad Desmarais, the vice president of casinos, who in 2017, while the government wasn't yet decided in May 2017, after the election, that they went on a junket and spent about $16,000 together to go on a junket. They flew into Hong Kong, spent some time in Hong Kong before and after, and spent most of their time in Macau at the G2E Global Gaming Exposition Convention in Macau. Macau is essentially the Las Vegas of China. It's a special administrative region, technically just like Hong Kong. It's not governed directly by Beijing, but it is a Chinese territory. And it is very popular with Chinese tourists and Chinese business people and even Chinese bureaucrats and politicians to go and spend some time in Macau and gamble there. It's also popular with criminals. And Macau has been connected to Vancouver through what's called the Vancouver model, which was what an Australian criminology professor, John Langdale, talked about last fall to a law enforcement conference in Australia about how Vancouver's casino industry is connected to Vancouver's real estate industry and is also connected to Vancouver's drug industry. And there's connections between all three of those industries, and Hong Kong and Macau, as well as South America. So in this case, there were supposed to be 5 people going this year to this year's edition of the G2E convention. Brad Demeray was going to go with them, but he did not go because of some personal reason, but 4 people did. They are Charlene Nielsen, who is the Director of Marketing and Product Management, Garth Pieper, the Director of Casino Operations, Jerry Williamson, Director of Gaming Facilities and Development, and Darren Jang, who is Senior Manager of Casino Product Management. And they spent almost $19,000 on flights and ferries and accommodation and meals and per diems. And they went from May 9th to 20th to this convention. The convention lasted 3 or 4 days, but they spent extra time there touring casinos in Macau and speaking to experts at Ernst & Young. And they, according to their social media profiles, also did some sightseeing. But the question is, what kind of value is there for BCLC to be sending people over to Macau at a time, especially when I think the casinos here in British Columbia have done pretty well with tourism from Asia. They boasted about it a few years ago, about high net worth individuals, VIP gamblers, and more recently we've learned to call them whales, and how some of them have become notorious in policing and court circles, and there's going to be more to come on that later this year. So, Brad Demeray wrote this memo to Jim Lightbody asking for permission, which was eventually granted, that they wanted to, quote, explore opportunities to adopt, improve a culturally appropriate gambling/entertainment player experience in appropriate facilities, as well as supporting the casino long-term growth strategy. I don't think that there's any argument about BC casinos catering very well, especially ones like River Rock and Park downtown, catering very well and very effectively to Asian gamblers. And I think that the casino long-term growth strategy is going on pretty well, especially when there's a new casino coming in Delta. This looked like it could have been a reward for job well done, according to the CEO. I don't know. He wasn't talking. He's not around, and nobody at BCLC put a live person in front of me for an interview. They just sent a boilerplate statement that said it was all done according to the rules, and they need to do this because of their business, and they wanted to bring new learnings and business connections back to BC to improve further the gambling and entertainment experience for players, end quote. That's what I was told by BCLC spokeswoman Sarah Morris. But it certainly does smell that while the German report was being finished in May, various members of management from BC Lottery Corporation were treated to a trip over to Macau, a place which has become notorious as a place for money laundering, and so has Vancouver.
A Richmond travel agency was shut down. What was the story behind that?
I also wrote about this in thebreaker.news this week, and you can see the story there, as well as the other stories about civic politics in the Macau junket. A company called Cinerama Holidays had an office in Richmond above a currency exchange near number 3 Road on Westminster Highway, and it is owned ultimately back east, a company that has offices and headquarters in Quebec and also offices in Ontario near Toronto. It was shut down by regulators, one by one, regulators in Quebec and Ontario and now British Columbia, where Consumer Protection BC moved against Cinerama on August 8th. They closed it down and said it's suspended for now, and they also seized the bank accounts because there is concern over this company, whether it has the ability, whether it has enough capital to continue operating as a travel agency, and whether people who bought trips from this agency will get what they paid for, or if this company was essentially paying Peter, robbing from Peter to pay back Paul, or vice versa, in order to stay afloat. In fact, I was able to find this company's public filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission, because it actually is listed on a very loosely regulated over-the-counter exchange in the United States. And it showed that they were spending a lot of money on advertising. Their advertising went up from about $1.45 million in 2015 to more than $6.4 million last year. And they also reported that they had a 5.6% reduction in revenue per customer for their Asian tours last year. And that was a strategy by the company to expand the volume and offer competitive prices. They basically had bargain basement prices for their flagship tours to Asia, especially to China, that they heavily advertised on national channels, including Hockey Night in Canada, for instance, and they were a sponsor of the Amazing Race. This is something that also caught the eye of Clara Newell, a travel agent with the Travel Best Bets company. I actually talked to her before I dug into the documents, and what she told me at the time was her observation as being someone in the travel industry who does sell package tours to China, that the price point that Cinerama was offering was a price point that she couldn't match, because she did her math and did their best to get the best prices, but she thought that they may have been even at Cinerama selling those package tours at cost, if not sometimes in a loss. So this company, which according to some of the documents showed it was profitable, but it also had a very murky ownership structure. Company has several subsidiaries and has the publicly traded side of the company based in Florida. It's got a subsidiary in Samoa, of all places, which is known as a tax haven. And it's got a whole bunch of investors at different levels. The ultimate owner, Martin Jing Wenjia, the CEO, she owned 54 1/3% of the parent company, but 131 other shareholders owned the rest. And according to some of their filings, many of them were people with Mandarin Chinese, mainland Chinese names, and it's unclear as to how much of this company was owned with investment from Canadians versus with investment from overseas. But now that it's closed, I'm sure there's going to be some lawsuits. Clara Newell compared this to the last big failure in the Canadian travel industry, was Canada 3000 Holidays back in November 2001. That was the holiday division of the charter airline known as Canada 3000, and it left a lot of people high and dry. And it forced the provincial regulators to step in and take action. These provincial regulators also do collect funds that go into a fund to help people out if they are stranded, if their travel agency goes out of business. Don't know how much compensation will be made and how many people have actually been left high and dry to the point where they're stuck yet. That is still a question that I'll be trying to find out. I did try to find out if anyone at Cinerama had anything to say. Well, their offices in Quebec and Ontario and BC either rang and rang and rang, or were busy and busy and busy, or went to voicemail boxes after voicemail boxes that nobody answered. I emailed the company to various email addresses, and I emailed the lawyer. They got a lawyer in the United States who works for the company for its publicly traded side, and didn't hear back from him either. I'd be very much interested in hearing what they have to say, what their side of the story is, of how their business has met at least a pause and may eventually meet its end.
Sir John A. MacDonald, persona non grata in Victoria, but he's welcome in Ontario. What's the story behind the statue?
Well, this is Mayor Lisa Helps, who's running for re-election. She decided to make national news a little over a week ago and to say that the City Hall was going to take down the John A. Macdonald statue, which was there since 1982. And John A. Macdonald, the founding Prime Minister of Canada, who was a former Member of Parliament for Victoria, who was widely credited for bringing British Columbia into Confederation because he heard the calls and made sure that the railway got to the Pacific Coast. He also has a bit of a black mark against him because he was the Prime Minister at the time who led the charge for Indian residential schools. And we now know, more than 150 years later, what kind of damage that did socially to Aboriginals and how much we're paying the price for all the ills that they had to face and endure at the residential schools, which existed all the way until the mid-1990s. So Lisa helps, instead of doing what a lot of historians, even in the United States, when it comes to Confederate statues, there's a debate there. Some historians say that you don't take down the statue. What you do is you add content to it. You add another sign that can perhaps update with the best information, factual information that we've been able to find out about the historical record of the person who's depicted in the statue. You offer additional information to say that, well, this was the person's achievement, but they also, in the sands of time, were judged to have made some mistakes because this is their policy and this is how their policy has affected us today. Some people call that revisionist history. Other people say that that's just adding facts and being as timely as possible to tell the story of the person, but it's better than taking down the statue because now you've got the debate of erasing history, and now it's out of sight, out of mind. That statue's in storage. She has no plan B for it, just says that, well, eventually they'll get around to finding a new place for it in a new context. But that'll be a long time after the election. And this is all about Lisa Helps running for re-election, bringing to the fore a wedge issue, a diversionary tactic to set the left and the right fighting amongst each other, essentially. They had to bring police to Victoria City Hall last Saturday morning when they hauled the statue away. There were some protesters. Luckily, it didn't get violent like we've seen in some cases in the United States with Confederate statues. Saner heads prevailed, but you do have people on various ends of the political spectrum that are unhappy one way or another. Some are happy that it's gone. Others are unhappy that it's gone. You do also have the original artist, John Dan, the sculptor from 1982, who said that it's good to create a conversation about the social problems of Canada, especially with Aboriginals, but at the same time, he was not necessarily happy that the statue was removed with very little public comment. I mean, Lisa Helps basically announced it one day, and it went to City Council the next day, and it got the vote in favor, and a couple of days later was gone. This is making her ultimately look bad, but again, she might be doing this for a calculated political move to please her base. But at the same time, as you watch this debate unfold, there are more important things. Last spring in Victoria, they counted about 1,500 people who were either homeless or living in precarious situations at shelters or temporary housing. That's 1,500 people that statue, by taking it down, is not going to help. And there's a large percentage of those people, larger percentage of those people than there is in the population of Aboriginals. And that's the big problem there. That taking down this statue may make some people feel good and think that they've done something for social justice, but it doesn't solve the problem that you have of people in poverty. That a third of the 1,500 people, so about 500 people counted in the housing or homelessness survey earlier this year, were Aboriginal, but the Aboriginal people make up less than 5% of the population. So they're overrepresented in the homelessness numbers, and it's easier for a politician like Lisa Helps, who's looking out for her power, than it is for someone to look after the social good of people. And that's why she did this. She's running for re-election. She wants those votes, and she wants people to, especially low-information voters, to feel good. But other people are standing back and saying, hey, wait, taking down that statue isn't going to solve any social problem. It may make you feel a little bit better, but is it going to help put a roof over the house, or a roof over the heads of those Aboriginal people in Victoria who are suffering?
Is Lisa Helps suggesting that Victoria change its name because Queen Victoria may have made some decisions that wouldn't be politically correct today?
She hasn't done that yet, but I think that's a conversation that's going to start raging here in British Columbia, of course, which has British in its history, but it's not very British anymore. And in Vancouver, of course, named after Sir Captain George Vancouver, who wasn't actually the first European to come into local waters. There were Spaniards that came before him. Of course, who knows what's going to happen in the future with parks around Vancouver. There's various parks that are named after politicians and others who have had their records criticized. I think this will all hinge upon the result of the Vancouver civic election. and what Lisa Help's allies in Vision Vancouver might do and might have up their sleeve, so what kind of wedge issues they might have to play in this game. But again, in naming and renaming of parks and streets, that may be an easy solution, but people want hard solutions to the difficult problems that we're facing today. And changing a name isn't going to help the people that are literally dying in the streets of Vancouver in this opioid crisis, people that have lost their homes, people that are struggling to pay their taxes to City Hall, and struggling to do the work that they do to keep a roof over their heads in Vancouver at this time. That really is crass politics, and as much as it's important for reconciliation to happen, for Canada to get, to put, make amends to the social problems that were caused by various government programs over the years, and to try to, have a handout to those who are suffering and struggling in the Aboriginal community. We all got to look at the entirety of the Canadian mosaic, and look at other aspects of the Canadian dream, and make sure that our governments are governing for all and are looking for, again, the dealing with the difficult problems instead of looking for the easy solutions of changing names of signs and parks and streets and removing statues, when dealing with people who have blood, sweat, and tears and toil, children that are suffering, families that are suffering. That's where our thoughts should be about whether a statue stays up or down.
And Sir John A. may not be alone for long. Hasn't Ontario's Premier suggested that he'd welcome him anytime?
Well, it doesn't look like it's going to happen, but I don't think Lisa Helps could anticipate. What happened was when Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, had his House Leader, Todd Smith, write a letter to her and say, if you don't want it in Victoria, we want it in Ontario, because we think his contributions to the country are significant, and we have parks where we can put John A. Macdonald so Canadians can learn about him and his contribution. So let's make an arrangement. We'll pay to bring it to Ontario, take it off your hands. She didn't respond immediately to that. She did respond to me. I was one reporter, and Joe Warmington of the Toronto Sun was another reporter on his end, asking in different ways that what was going on with Lisa Helps, and would she agree to let another government take it off BC's hands? And she said no. She eventually did send a response to Todd Smith's executive assistant saying thanks but no thanks, and the plan that they had was that it was going to remain City of Victoria property, but they'll find another way to display it with greater context. So as much as Doug Ford made some national attention himself and tried to one-up Lisa Helps, it didn't work in the long run, because that statue is going to stay in Victoria, somewhere behind closed doors in Victoria. And we'll see what happens on October 20th. If anyone comes out of the woodwork to challenge Lisa Helps, not only on this, but also on the social conditions in downtown Victoria, the homelessness, the drug addiction, the mental illness, as well as the lack of law and order in downtown Victoria. Those are the issues that Lisa Helps is trying to use the John A. Macdonald statue kerfuffle as distraction from actually solving.
Bob, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you.
My guest has been award-winning investigative reporter Bob Mackin. He's also the publisher of thebreaker.news, his website, thebreaker.ca. You're listening to The Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@housestreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on The Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.